Yes, there is a US presidential election well underway. Half the votes that are expected to be cast have already been cast even before voting day. The rallies are still on, and yes, it is going to boil down to something that most people are saying is still too close to call. There's no clear winner, because now we are having a conversation that this is as polarized an America as it seems to get. Has it gotten worse in the past 4 years? Is this about substantive policy issues? Is this a personality contest? Is this an ideological battle? Is it all of the above, and what's at stake? Let's continue this conversation. I'm expecting to join us very shortly Daniel Wagner, currently CEO of the Country Risk Solutions. Zachary Brown is joining us. He is contesting for the Republican Senate seat out of North Carolina. We'll be speaking to him very, very shortly. Before that, let me get Scott Faulkner and Maura Moynihan back into this conversation. Scott Faulkner, we were discussing before the break that this is polarized, that people are passionate, that this is not, you can't go through this election cycle having missed it or not having bothered about it. Why? What has changed? Is it because we are being bombarded with content 7 hours a day on our mobile phones? Or is there something fundamentally different about the world we live in?
I think it's fundamentally different. Again, I think what we're looking at here is the Democrat platform is the most left-wing ever. The Democrat nominee, Kamala Harris, is the most left-wing ever. I mean, even worse than Mondale, even worse than McGovern, even worse than Carter. And so we're dealing with a very, very strong totalitarian, statist, really communist approach to America, where they want to reshape America as a unitary totalitarian state. When you look at some of the rhetoric from not only Harris and her surrogates, but the academicians who advise her, they would like to get rid of the U.S. Senate because they figure that everything should be based on population. If that happened, the top 30 cities in America, which are all run by Democrats, some for over 100 years, would basically run the entire country because they are filled with people who, I mean, some of these places like Philadelphia and others, I mean, they're 80, 90%, Washington, D.C., 96% Democrat. And so they would love to have a unitary state. The whole strength of America, going back to our founding, especially our Constitution in 1787, is a federal system where you have local government, not national government. And you have you also have a divided system where you have checks and balances between the three branches of government, and then within the legislative branch, the balancing between population-centered representation in the House and state-centered representation in the Senate. Those are things that have kept us from becoming a dictatorship.
Fair enough. Let me get Maura back into this. Maura, but you've been through, like as you mentioned, election campaigns from the inside out. When an election is on, things get said and certain positions are taken, and then the election concludes and we sort of move on with life. Why do you feel that it's become so polarized that it's becoming difficult to move on?
This is not the Democratic Party that I grew up with. As Bobby Kennedy Jr. said when he famously joined the Trump campaign the day after the Democratic convention, this party of today's Democratic Party bears no resemblance to that of his uncle, John F. Kennedy, his father, Bobby Kennedy, or my father, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who served in John F. Kennedy's administration as a cabinet level. And as I said before, we are in year 6 of Communist China's People's War on the United States. And Reshab, you have done superb work on China. I want to congratulate you in NewsX. You would never see that kind of in-depth reporting and analysis in an American newscast, ever. They always favored China. Throughout the pandemic, they were praising China, and they demonize India as like the rape capital of the world. They never talk about the Uyghur genocide, do they? And now there's this obsession with, Israel and Gaza, and tremendous anti-Semitism. They never talk about the 20 million people in the concentration camps in communist China, which started in Tibet and then moved to East Turkestan. And so Communist China is funding a lot of the anti-Semitic groups that I've seen take over New York City. I've witnessed this firsthand. I've seen they are also funding a lot of the candidates for the House and for the Senate. And I really think that if the American people really truly engage, then we can push
Okay.
back this revolution. That is, and if America falls, it's not going to be good for other democracies in the world, and that includes Bharat Mata. That includes India.
Okay, so okay, so you're convinced that this is not rhetoric. That this is something you actually believe in, and this is real. And we let people watching the broadcast judge the reality of it. Let me get Zachary Brown into this conversation. Zachary, first of all, best wishes for your own Senate fight. Swing state, North Carolina. I can tell you're a Beatles fan. How's it going?
Good, brother. Thank you for bringing me up here. To caveat off of that, I agree, honestly. To speak of the difference in what the Democratic Party is, then versus now, then as in, especially JFK's era. I mean, Jackie Boy was loved by America, not even a competition, whether it was on the radio or face to face. It was not a competition between him and Nixon. Bringing up the difference between numbers, the public loved JFK. He also stood for a completely different ideology. When we speak about the fact that they are going towards different rhetoric and different means now, Lenin spoke about the formula when he was in power, way back when. To quote directly, all over the world, wherever there are capitalists, freedom of the press means freedom to buy up newspapers, to buy writers, to bribe, buy, and fake public opinion for the benefit of the bourgeoisie. For the first time ever, the reason that this is such a pivotal, important thing is not only does the world rely on the strength and viability of the United States to operate and condone itself in a way that benefits everyone that relies on our economy and support, but also this is the first time we've seen federal agencies getting involved in an election. Again, we see it down your throat. Vote for this person. I'll get letters that are absolutely distasteful. What happened to an actual debate? Why is there no rhetoric? You watch debates where not a single question gets answered, not one. Why is that who you're giving your vote to? Why do you trust that person to make decisions in your best interest? When were these people born? The entire American system, to go back to that, what we were created and founded upon. We had people in this country that died for a system, for land that they never even got to enjoy. The Continental soldiers that died never even got to enjoy the nation that they created for us. It was always supposed to be your everyday average American up there. Instead, we have politics in a dictatorial system from the top down. Because if you want to stay in your state seat, you have to keep everyone above you happy. Otherwise, you'll never make your way up. So now, how do we have any separation of power if your job hinges on you being obedient? Instead, we have totalitarianism control. It's a dictatorship in disguise, per se.
Okay.
We are hinging on the difference between the free world, the actual world, since we have the largest MEC in the world, or a complete change of pace. This is make or break for the entire world.
For a lot of people who ask me this question off camera, and I tell them sometimes it's all right to watch a little bit of less news, because if you put the TV on, it looks like the world is burning. Is Zachary Brown, is it doom and gloom? Is it necessarily the existential crisis as you're describing it?
Yes. Yeah. In all honesty, if you go around and you speak to average American people, your everyday, as they claim, I'm from the middle class people, they can't afford, what is the average wage? Take $15, multiply it by however much you want, and how long do they actually have to work to afford 3 times for just rent? Is it okay? They can't afford each price. We choose to manipulate numbers and make it look like it's okay. It's actually bad. What is the response time in Los Angeles for police? Long enough for spectators and onlookers to show up. Long before the fire department for a flipped car, for a drunk driver, for a head-on collision, anything. Is the world burning? The United States is not the same place. every single person that actually lives in the real world, in the actual bubble of normal American people, not paid by a company, no special interests, no one telling you to say this, knows for a fact that this isn't the same. Nothing costs the same. The quality of living is impossible. Anyone that's now becoming an adult and facing reality is realizing, oh, I can't get a home. I have to get 3 roommates first, and we all have to combine our barely livable salary. It's not livable. Let's not even call it livable. It's not minimum wage. Minimum wage is a standard set number that is supposed to be the minimum number to survive. They don't make that. If they did, they wouldn't need 3 roommates to afford an apartment. It's insane. It is as bad as they say it is.
All right. So Zachary, is it then about this? Listen, there is an inflation issue. There is a cost of living issue. Employment seems to be being okay, but you can reasonably argue that the money was poured in, trillions of dollars were poured in during the end of COVID, and that was under a different government. And what could Joe Biden have done about it in the past 4 years?
What could he have done differently in the past 4 years? Anything that he had promised, each individual aspect of that. So not rallying the market in a fictitious way to make everyone think that it's grand and great and grandiose. If you watch any FOMC meeting, you sit there and the news will tell you everything's great. And then you hear Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, tell you, yep, people can't afford homes, can't afford rent, defaults on credit are up, anything. We can't lock rates. We can't have better trade deals. We can't have a backbone. Trump's rhetoric that this wouldn't have happened. I can't say it wouldn't have happened, but people actually fear someone that's going to make a difference. This man has spent 4 years doing absolutely nothing for the country. The same man that has somehow convinced America that he cares about them. A demographic of people, we're speaking about the only senator in recent history to use a racial slur multiple times in a single hearing. Does that sound like someone that cares about the American people? Absolutely not. Any of these promises, what did we get told? Well, I'm too busy. If you get the off-camera interviews with Biden, the snippets that the media does not want to show you, shut up, go away, or something incoherent. What he could have done that would have helped us in the last 4 years is let someone that actually cared about the country take the seat instead of benefacting himself and his family that does not deserve it.
Okay, just hold your thought for a second. Let me get a different perspective from Daniel Wagner, who's back with us. Mr. Wagner, so, as I see it here, I don't have skin in the game. We are seeing a conversation that is telling us that here is Trump, who's a racist, fear-mongering, fascist, who is going to lead another charge up Capitol Hill come January, versus that here is a Democratic Party that is putting together a communist totalitarian state, and it's an existential crisis either way. Is it?
I think there are a lot of generalizations that are being made on both sides. The previous speaker was talking generalizations about Joe Biden. Biden doesn't control the stock market. He doesn't control the price of gasoline. The market does, right? And so the market believes that times are good. The market believes that the economy is roaring, and the statistics bear that out. Ms. Moynihan was saying earlier how she doesn't recognize the Democratic Party. Fair enough. I don't recognize the Republican Party. It was hijacked by Donald Trump, and it doesn't bear any resemblance to Reagan-esque Republican Party at all. So I think that the problem is that we're all so conditioned to accept this generalistic rhetoric, and it's not necessarily backed up by facts. This is a big problem in America, where people believe what they're told and they don't bother to check the facts.
But, okay, so let me rephrase it.
But they don't bother to check the facts.
Is there a voter out there which is going to be an emotional voter, that they're going to vote on emotions regardless of what the economic situation might be, regardless of what the supermarket prices might actually be?
Unfortunately, there's a ton of voters out there like that. They vote only on emotions. The problem is that we have a winner-take-all system, which is deeply flawed. We should not be having the Electoral College. It's based on ancient math. and we should not be having voter election day on a Tuesday. This was based on an ancient agricultural society when we were 200 years ago. We need severe reform in this country in a lot of different areas. But the problem is that a lot of the things that don't matter to people. They care about what a celebrity thinks. They care about sensationalism. They want to believe conspiracy theories. This is a poisonous cauldron that has greatly contributed to the situation that we have today in America. You asked about the stakes earlier. The stakes couldn't be higher. Of course, depending on which side you're talking to, the other person is the devil. To them, this is an simple issue between good and evil. It's not that simple. It's much more complicated. We have gotten ourselves into this cauldron through our own mistakes, through allowing ourselves to think the way that we do, to become conditioned as we have in American society to this normalization of the absurd, which is what this circus of an election process has become. I fear very much for my country. I fear for the world. I wrote a piece in the Sunday Guardian a week ago where I basically said I don't recognize my country, and I don't. This isn't the country I grew up in.
Okay, so let me get Daniel Wagner back in. Daniel Wagner, is there still a meeting ground available that we leave room for the rhetoric and the pulls and pushes of an electoral cycle, knowing full well that it's over in a couple of days, and actually America is doing fine and it rolls on regardless of what has happened. It's a great country, it's a rich country, still going places and still calling the shots across the world.
As The Economist has said, we are the envy of the world, and for good reason. But yes. I don't think our political system is.
Okay, I'll put the same question to Daniel Wagner. Daniel Wagner.
Yeah, we're going to survive this process.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Okay. But the problem is that the next cycle is going to start the day after the election. It's just continual.
All right. I'll repeat the same question then for Scott Faulkner. Scott Faulkner, is there some common ground that can be found? And I mean, let's take this with a pinch of salt.
I think that if people, number one, I think if the Democrats win, I think Republicans will take the Senate. The House is still going to maybe take a week to sort out. But the Democrats really do want a unitary totalitarian state. Now, if they fail, then there's a lot of common ground. There's a lot of issues regarding infrastructure. I think one of the more positive themes that Trump and RFK Jr. brought up is make America healthy again. We are overdrugged. Big pharma is too powerful. It'd be great to be able to have a common ground forged to not only create a healthier lifespan, but actually create a health span where people are healthy into their 90s, that their brain is still solid and cogent into their 90s, that they're not in a wheelchair into their 90s. This is about health. This is about wellness. This is about decent food that isn't filled with preservatives. This is about exercise and fresh air. And getting rid of all these drugs that are just destroying people and with their side effects. I think that would be a huge.
So let me ask that question as a curious outsider, because as I have any good Indian who's a Punjabi from North India, I have close family living who are American citizens and they're voters in this election. But meeting them, I find it strange how much a simple operation costs or how simple medicines cost. They're not 1/10 the price here; they're 1/100th the price here. It's laughable. But at the same time, I can't understand how there are more guns in America than people. Is it just in extremis? The system has just gotten broken and it requires a fix.
Oh, absolutely. If you are in a huge accident or having a heart condition or need something complex diagnosed, America is the #1 country in the world for those kind of medical interventions.
Yes.
If you have a chronic condition, if you have a terminal condition, if you have any other kind of holistic condition, America is like 34th or 39th in the world. And so there's a huge disconnect between the acute care that Americans enjoy and the chronic and wellness care that we don't enjoy. And that should be an area where we can forge some common ground.
All right. Let me get Zachary back in. Zachary, for people watching the broadcast, what got you into politics, regardless of which political party, of course, you ended up joining? What got you into politics?
Honestly, the fact that the truthful answer is, prior Marine, my promise to this country, my oath, I still know, is to the Constitution and of its people, and it's against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And the fact that we have a system where our politicians can be bribed, where we are putting, 800 things or more into a single bill, we can't get any answers. We're not represented by ourselves. The demographic of our Congress and Senate are not our own people. It's because we're not following the very fundamental thing that I defended, that I am I am medically retired from the service from this. I'm missing part of my spine, mental health, my hand, my leg, and yet still here I am. I am here, whether I win or not, to show the rest of America that you should stand up, because your opinion matters, no matter what it is. It doesn't matter if we disagree. His comment about my generalizations followed by his generalizations. It doesn't matter. What matters is that average people were supposed to represent everyday people, and that doesn't happen. You're asking why we don't have this, why we don't have this, why we don't have this. Look at who is representing you. This is a career for them, and they have made millions of dollars off of it. Why would they care to do what you're asking to do when you're not paying them millions of dollars? It is a system that we can collectively take back, because we are allowed to vote in who represents us. Talking about the Electoral College, completely different argument. But talking about where the meat and potatoes happens, our sitting Congress, everyday people should absolutely rally up, rise up, and pick your neighbor. It doesn't matter if you disagree with them. If they will get up there and make decisions and vote through legislation that actually benefits you and not them, that is what you should do. So I, at the very least, am here to represent myself and hopefully inspire others to enter politics as they were supposed to. It's not supposed to be a lifelong career. It's not a family friend gig. No, it's supposed to be everyday faces changing each election cycle so that we can hear new opinions and hear what someone that has lived everyday America wants everyday America to look like.
Okay, Moira Moynihan, Ms. Moynihan, I'll leave the last few words with you. And let me leave it on this note, because this election will end, and then 2 years later there will be a midterm, and there will be another election. As we've already discussed, the Senate is probably going to change sides, and we don't know how the House of Representatives is going to go. There are, for people watching the broadcast, there are state elections, state Congress elections happening as well, and governor elections happening as well. American democracy is designed to be at odds and ends and have all sorts of levels of power intricately sort of opposing each other, which slows down the system but keeps the system democratic. Are we overplaying the crisis, that actually there is common ground that can be found both in terms of personality and on policy?
Well, of course there's common ground. Americans want peace abroad. They want peace and prosperity at home. And my father always said you have to judge politicians on their record. Say what you want about Donald Trump's jokes, his style, his flair. He delivered peace and prosperity. That's the most important thing. And I want to thank Mr. Brown for his military service. And I'm sorry to hear about his health issues he sustained in the service. And I agree with Mr. Faulkner. The Democratic Party today has become full totalitarian. And I have studied communism my entire life from my Indian high school years when I met Tibetan refugees. And I'd like to ask Mr. Wagner, the previous guest, when he says he doesn't recognize the Republican Party, they've become so extreme. Oh, really? Mr. Wagner, do you support the Democratic Party platform that wants men in women's sports, that wants sex change operations for minors, that wants an open border? Kamala Harris said she wants taxpayers to pay for sex change operations for illegal aliens in jail. Does Mr. Wagner care about the thousands of children and women who've been raped and murdered by illegal alien gang members that Biden-Harris has allowed into our open border. This is a crisis, the like of which I have never seen. No one in America has ever seen anything like this open border. And also, will Mr. Wagner disavow Kamala Harris and Joe Biden calling half of Americans, maybe more with the independents, Nazis and garbage? Or is that kind of inflammatory, insulting rhetoric okay? Is it really okay to liken Donald Trump, a New York businessman, philanthropist, and former president, with Adolf Hitler, one of the most horrific mass murderers in human history? That's disrespectful to the victims of Nazi tyranny. But I suppose that Mr. Wagner is okay with that because he appears to have an extreme case of TDS Trump derangement.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.